welcome to Science Conversations here at NTNU. Science Conversations was started as an initiative during COVID times to make knowledge available within the university, but also beyond NTNU and our ecosystem that we are in. My name is Julius Wesche. I'm a researcher at the Department for look what I'm researching on. I'm a researcher at the NTNU Department of Transdisciplinary Studies of Culture, and I also run the NTNU Energy Transition podcast. I take over this episode of Science Conversations because Nancy Baselchuk is doing something else today, but she will be back in the next month. Today, it's about eco-friendly science. And what you are going to learn when you watch this webinar is, what does eco-friendly actually mean? What does eco-friendly science actually mean? What can we do in order to maybe make the way we do research more eco-friendly? And is it just about the things, or is it maybe also about people? And in the end, we're going to talk about, okay, what can we as individuals and what can we do on an organizational level? Because it is so easy to say it's you, and we have to bear the burdens ourselves, but actually, maybe we actually also have to adjust some of the institutions at NTNU and beyond to maybe make the research we do more sustainable and more friendly. I'm an energy transition researcher, and that means that I spend quite some time at energy transition conferences, and guess what? There's a lot of white, middle-aged to older gentlemen there, and normally on these panels, there's maybe sometimes only men. And these panels are not called panels, but they're called actually manels, because it's just men, which is a bit sad. And then maybe in a good movement of, good faith, there's maybe a woman that can do the moderation. And maybe that's not 2023 anymore. So I'm happy to be actually joined by 3 amazing women researchers today. And because I think this makes sense, and maybe now the gentleman or the guy can actually do the conversation and the moderation. So I'm joined by, first, Thora Bonnevik, who's on my left here. She is an associate professor, and she used to be a medical doctor in her previous life at the Department of Neuromedicine and Movement Science, and she is also a 50% sustainability coordinator, also at the Department of Neuroscience and Movement Science. And Thora traveled to Germany this week for 3 days, and we're going to talk about that. On the other left, so further down there, we've got Anna Norberg. Anna Norberg is a postdoc in community ecology at the Center for Biodiversity and Dynamics, also here at NTNU. And she studies the interaction between different species and their environment. And I think that's very handy, because when we think about ecological science, then we got to study ourselves and how we interact, not just with the researchers around us, but maybe also with the environment in which we are embedded in. And Anna is going to talk about later about a sausage maker machine. And so stay here with us so that you find out what that actually is about. And then on my right side, we have Karine Louslet. She is a sister from another mother, because she's not at NTNU anymore, but she works at Synth Community. There she hosts, or she runs, and she coordinates a team of 14 colleagues, and that team works on construction materials and structures. Very happy also to have you here, Karine. And she's an industrial ecologist that assesses environmental sustainability in a quantitative manner. And she's got 3 children, so we're going to talk about as well a little bit about the implications of eco-friendly science on our on the people that maybe are not at university, but maybe are connected to us at university. So I said we start off with eco-friendly. So let's get this started. What does eco-friendly actually mean? And I'm going to turn to Anna. So Anna, what does eco-friendly mean?
Yeah, it's like eco-friendly science. It's a really good question, especially for us ecologists, because we're very interested always in hearing that what do other people mean when they put this eco prefix to things? Does it relate to economy? Does it relate to ecology? What does it actually mean? Ecology in itself is actually it's a science that studies the interactions between species and also their interaction with their environment. Economic studies like resource allocation, like optimal resource allocation. So I don't have a good answer to this per se, but maybe, I don't know, are we talking about eco-friendly, how are we friendly towards each other, to other species, and also to our environment?
Thora.
Yeah, so to me it sounds like the way you describe it, that sustainability is actually a really good word, because that's really it took me a little bit of time also to really re-appreciate the amazingness of this word, which is really focused on the whole, right? Isn't that what you're talking to? So resources, whether we think of things or people, with the economy, with the nature, with society, people. Yeah. Do you agree that that's a good term to align to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just need to figure out what it means.
But that's what we researchers do, isn't it? We start off defining what we're actually looking at in a paper, in a book, in a presentation that we give. So what I take from you ladies now is that eco-friendly is maybe not necessarily a very clear term, and maybe broadening it a bit to more sustainability and sustainable friendly might have some merits. We'll talk about that later as well. So when we then think about eco-friendly science, so we talk about eco-friendly, what does eco-friendly science then mean? Who could answer that? When is science eco-friendly? Anna.
Well, I guess like continuing what I said before, maybe it's like also as scientists we're not somehow like separate from the world we are in, or like the society where we're in. So eco-friendly science, I guess, then would be something science doing which is somehow sustainable, or like somehow like friendly towards the environment where we're in.
Yeah, good. So it includes the things, how we run our organizations, how we do our science, and it includes also other things like what we do research on. For example, is that eco-friendly? Is that sustainable? And these are the two topics that we're also going to discuss in the next minutes in this session. Karine, when we think about eco-friendly science, then the first idea that I had was like, okay, it's about the pipettes, it's about the traveling, it's about the concrete that is needed and required for our buildings. Now, it was recently decided that we'll move our Dragwall campus down to the city center, and you work a lot with construction, you work with a lot of these topics. So maybe give us an idea like about the things. When is science maybe not eco-friendly when we talk about things?
Yeah, so first when I heard eco-friendly in my ears, it was more that I think about environmental sustainability. And this is because of my background in industrial ecology, where we really quantify environmental sustainability. And then working, being the manager of the group, working with construction materials and being used in construction works, then of course my view is going a bit more into directly to the construction sector. So from the materials, different types of materials that can be used in different ways, more eco-friendly ways as well. Maybe to give you an example for the concrete, for example, as you mentioned before, maybe using a bit more different type of cement or additives to use in the concrete to make it more, let's call it eco-friendly or more environmentally friendly in terms of CO2 emissions, but also in terms of resource use to diversify a bit the use of resource going to a specific construction material, going to construction works, being used by the whole society. So in my view, it's really to go to have a good understanding of the different parts of this, I would say, maybe ecosystem of the society, one by one, but also building up together with others, a very good understanding on how they interact together and how we interact to the system.
When we talk about construction, for example, where can we see that maybe the way we operate right now is not sustainable, is not eco-friendly? Give us some ideas. Why is it? Like, is it sustainable what we are doing? Is it eco-friendly what we are doing?
A very good example will be the amount of construction waste that goes directly to landfill or waste incineration, of course with energy recovery, but still many of those construction material flows could be directed to be used, if not directly, pretty much. So there is a lot to do there in order to reuse those flows that are now considered as waste, but that could be reused in many ways.
Yeah. So when we think about what is maybe not eco-friendly, then maybe the way how we build our buildings in science is not very eco-friendly. Tura, there's a lot of other things that are also not really sustainable or not eco-friendly when we talk about things. You work in, now I have to look at my cards again. You work at the Department of Neuromedicine and Movement Science, so that's more care, that's more health systems around it. Can you give us an idea where you feel that science, the way it is done right now, is not necessarily very eco-friendly.
Yeah, so to even kind of turn the question a tiny bit, I think that just when we started working on health and sustainability, I had to really spend some time talking to people and discuss like what does really sustainability mean in terms of health, or eco-friendly if we start there. So like nature and health, that's kind of how is it related together. And the long answer is very long, but the short answer is that I think that's also such a nice angle to see how everything is so connected. So with health and sustainability, you often think of the social sciences, all the resources, equality, economy, these sort of things. But the health system is also a huge impact on the ecosystem. So actually the health, the expenditure for health, both on the global and national level, is 4 to 5%, which is double of the airport traffic. Can you imagine? So that just illustrates that spending resources, no matter if it is directly the pipettes, tips, or the traveling, it has an impact on the environment in a broader level. So that is one way to link it. But then that even brings you into like what brings health, right? And how are people happy? What is health and well-being? And even in the science system, we also use a lot of people. So I think it even logs onto the kind of whole use of resources in terms of human resources. So how do we spend the energy and the human resources in the best way to produce the best science? So,
and how is that done currently? Or where would you say it's maybe not done in a sustainable way? Or
well,
an eco-friendly way?
Yeah. Well, people with some experience in temporary positions, you have a budget that you need to fit together to be able to run the projects you want to do. So there are many challenges in order to kind of best get max excellent science, which is what we really want, and hopefully relevant science based on the resources we have. So I think that how people engage in science is also related to eco-friendly science, if depending on what we put in the term. I don't know if
I see
if
Anna
you agree.
nodding.
Yeah.
What's your point here?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that there's a really good point about like the utilization of like also human resources, because like currently like the system is such that like often we're faced with the situation that we cannot actually do what we would want to do in terms of science.
Give us an experience.
Well, funding, you don't get the funding that you need. You don't get the, for example, a classic example in ecology is that we don't get kind of long-term funding that would enable us, for example, to collect long-term data. If we are interested in like seeing what are the changes in, let's say, Norwegian biodiversity, the only way that you can measure change is by measuring change. And like, how do you get change? You collect data over a long period of time, but this is not something that can be necessarily done when you get let's say you get a position for 2 years or so.
Yeah, Anna, we were talking briefly before we started about the number of postdocs that you've done. Can you give us the number, please?
Like, it depends on how you calculate it, but like 2, 3, or 4. Yeah. Okay,
let's keep it there. Tura, you used this word. Was it eco shadow? I think. We'll come back to the things again in a second, and I'll talk more to Karine about it. But Tura and Anna, you were more referring also to the social point, or not social, but like the people really. When we think about eco-friendly science from maybe even a things perspective, how does the people perspective have an influence on the things perspective? Can you elaborate that, please?
Yeah, no, well, it has, just as Anna is describing, like if people move from postdoc to postdoc and you have to maybe go before you have to finish what you wanted to do, that to produce a science you were meant to do, which is good for you and for the whole good of science, right? It, of course, costs resources in a way, and we also know that mental health problems are frequent also among young scientists and sometimes also students. Well, that causes health resource need again, and you're not able to produce a science that you were meant to do. So it is all connected. We're back to the wholeness, and we need to kind of think broader, I think, both in the term and time perspective, as you mentioned, and also in the kind of wider calculations or economical calculations, if you want, to see what really produce the best outcome of the resources we spend in a broad sense. And this is even what you know a lot about. So I wonder if I may ask directly, like, how can we add this broader perspective into the calculations when you calculate what is eco-friendly?
Just to come back a bit to what you said just before, the resource use. I think maybe maybe we're going to go back to that later, but still, it's maybe the way, how we are measured in, it's not only academia, but in science in general, how much we publish, or where we publish, or with who we publish. And this can create also a type of competition. It's good to create good results and to trigger everyone to be inspired and to really feel motivated to do our best. But it has a limit. And I think we could find ways to empower and encourage collaboration is a good thing. We are stronger together.
Did that answer, or?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're constantly moving in interesting points, right? So I just think the point of competition is a very, very valid one, because we agree that there is some sort of idea that competition will create maybe the best result at the end, but the question is a bit at what expense, if I understand you correctly. And
and especially, Karin, you told me before we started here now that you had your first child, I think, when you were a student or when you were a PhD student, and that master students even. That also then has maybe repercussions, the ones that Tura mentioned when it comes to people. Karin, in the beginning of the week, the board of NTNU decided to continue going downtown or to Glöshaugen, and since there was a lot of criticism that this project is going to take a lot of money, they decided on continuing, but many environmental related measures were taken out of it. And I know this is a very political question, and I don't expect you to answer everything on that, but for me that's the perfect picture of okay, we want to be sustainable, we want to be eco-friendly, but then the money comes in and we can't do that anymore. What's a way from you as a quantitative person that works a lot with structures and architecture, is there a way around it, or do we always have to accept that we have high ambitions, especially in Norway, and then we might not even deliver on them?
Maybe the first point to this answer would be like sustainability has 3 pillars, right? The economic part, the environmental part, and the human part as well, social aspect. So the 3 pillars are as important and also complement each other. So when one has to take a decision, like for example, where the campus should stand, those 3 pillars are of course taken into account. Then when one influences more the other, it depends a little, but it's true. It can be seen as a bit of a shame if we have to be realistic, that's for sure. But if the economic part takes up, and also maybe goes a bit together with what you say. Sometimes it can be difficult in science to have fundings for long-term project, right? Maybe it's a bit of inspiration here as well. Like maybe it's going to be more expensive today, but look at the benefit that we will have over time. They are enormous. So that's, But to give you a very concrete answer on the environmental aspect of that, there are different aspects who should be taken into account as well, from the materials, the choice of material-friendly materials, new materials, or a bit more eco-friendly materials. That goes into the construction works, and it's really a time of a question of size as well. The bigger you construct, the more materials you need, and the less eco-friendly you are. So there are many ways to reduce a little bit or increase. Let's talk positively, to increase the eco-friendliness of the campus, for example, in order to fulfill the same function that the campus has to fulfill over the years.
I guess it's sometimes just also very challenging when we know that we have climate change and we know that we are coming to the ceiling of how much emissions we can put out, and then we have the opportunity in such a rich country as Norway it is to do something that is really sustainable, and then money holds us back. And then, money is a big thing, and we know that there's Minister Ola Borten who gave a lot of criticism, but the question is are we still living in a time where we can ignore these environmental threats that we're actually all facing? Anna?
Yeah, I wanted to pick one word that you said, that realism, that we always talk about economical realism, that and what do we have money for, but what about ecological realism? What do we do at this is not something that is that deals that happens in Norway necessarily, but what do we do? What kind of reality are we facing at the moment when we turn on the tap and the water is not coming out? Like, what's the price tag of that? Like, it doesn't happen. It's not necessarily like happening today, even though like I very much think that like we're at that point when we're already starting to see the effects of climate change, so that there is extreme drought in various parts of the world, and this is very real. This is very real for the people who are facing it.
Right now in France and in Italy, they have winter drought.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to your point.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like, I would want to question a little bit like these 3 pillars of sustainability. Do we actually think that they are like, are they in parallel to each other, or is it actually possible that 2 might be slightly more dependent on one of them? I leave you guessing which one I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think it has also a lot to do to the long-term perspective, right? If we don't see the economical, it's going to cost a loss. It's going to cost a lot. This climate change will have very negative effect, as you mentioned, one of them, and they will cost. Just that we start to see some effect of that now, but maybe how many of them should we have to face in order to really realize that it does also cost money, lives as well, but life quality, but money as well. Yeah.
1 second. Now, you want to go?
No.
Go, Tora.
Yeah. Okay. No, just talking about the money, and I think what comes out of several things you guys have been saying is evaluation, which you also raised. Like, how do we evaluate what we do, whether it's in terms of the economical calculation and whether it's in terms of the scientists, what they contribute with, and even in the students. For we want now to put sustainability more into education, and they also have a valid point that, okay, but how will we be evaluated at the end of the day? And I wonder, like, maybe that's also an important place where we need to think a bit differently and a bit more long-term, a bit wider, because as you say, like, if it's economically smart tomorrow, if we just lose everything, it's not so relevant anymore. And even open question, do you think that's a place where we might find some rapid transitions coming up actually? I guess the more we see them in the real world, the more we will eventually see them. But it's the way how society works is you can envision it as like that we have a regime of what works, and only if that regime actually gets pressure from the people within it, and maybe the things like droughts, and then we realize, okay, this system, the way how it works right now, is not functioning the way it's supposed to do in order to provide societal functions to society. Then maybe eventually the actors will start and will realize, okay, we got to change this now. But the thing is, here in Norway, we live in such a rich country. Maybe we don't realize how things are taking place in other countries, and that makes it harder maybe to take challenging decisions as well. Anna, maybe we're moving now to the second one, and that is not just saying, okay, where is science potentially not eco-friendly or sustainable, but doesn't it also matter what research we are doing on? And I talked in the intro a little bit about this sausage making machine, and could you connect that transition? What is the sausage making machine, and how does it relate to science and the way how we do science?
Yeah, well, this classic. It's a pretty classic example. This sausage making machine that like it's a question for the whole university or the whole academia, maybe or the whole society. That like. At the moment, we have a sausage-making machine, and we are starting to realize that we don't want sausages anymore. But at the moment, what we're doing is that we're trying to tweak the buttons and the knobs of the sausage-making machine, but it's still producing the sausages. They just look slightly different. But in fact, we should be kind of changing the whole machine. The whole machine. We should be like building, like also in the university, we should like be building it like from bottom up in a democratic way, that like how do we actually want to do, how do we want to do science, what do we want to do, what do we want to achieve. NTNU wants to, like knowledge for a better world. So like
which is, I think is a great great tagline. But
exactly, but like there should be like there should be like an open conversation about that for example, what is this knowledge for a better world? What does this consist of? What kind of knowledge do we want to produce, and how do we want to produce it?
Yeah, Tora.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing knowledge for a better world, because I love that vision as well. But my question was also always like, how does knowledge produce knowledge, or how does it produce a better world? Because does that go by itself, or what is the place of knowledge in society, which I guess is a field you also have some background for, and what is the wider implication also of the research that we already do. So, and where is the critical discussions about that? I would love to participate. Maybe we should have it more often. Yeah.
So when we then go away from the things we like, the unsustainable things that are being used, or the resources are being used, also personnel or us as people, now we switch to this, like, what is it that this university should actually be doing? So like where should we do research on? What topics should we research on? Like I feel this is a very important thing, and I would love for you to talk about it. And Tura, you just started on that, but like, how do we decide what is right and what maybe stops us on doing research that really creates a better world?
What stops us, I think, is much of the system that has been already mentioned. Like we have this term of free science, which we will all want to happen, but we have a lot of constraints.
Which
honestly.
also gives us the opportunity to actually do these conversations on an official NTNU channel, which is a pleasure, and it's great that this opportunity is there. But yes, I'm good at interrupting, so here you go again.
Yeah, no, it's. I think we have been all addressing these issues. So like, it's back to evaluation. It's back to do we have the long-term enough views on where do we want, and you also mentioned like where do we want to go. So this element of future thinking, which I think also comes back more and more, like what is it that we want to achieve, and can we trust that just producing knowledge, which sometimes we should just produce without knowing it. I'm also a fundamental researcher by heart, so I know the value of fundamental research, but where is it supposed to add in? And you asked about the constraints for it. So I think it also even practically comes down to the question of like interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary science, that it's difficult to do because it involves a huge risk for researchers also to endeavor into these fields. And
why? Where's the risk?
You seem to actually have something going on. Like, no, it takes a lot of work to put it up in a good way. So first of all, just adding 2 ingredients, like in an interdisciplinary project, isn't excellent by itself. So the question is, how do you put them together in a good way, and how much should you invest in actually learning about different fields, or putting up teams that could work well together to solve an actual real-world problem which you are raising? And that might fail. It's really high risk, high gain in its sense. And what do you do if it fails? And how do you get paid back scientifically if you have spent a lot of time to invest in that discussions and to talk the same language? And I guess everybody having worked interdisciplinary, they know it takes a lot of time. And it isn't necessarily what is valued today in science. Yeah, or some nodding over there. So.
Building directly on what you say.
Yeah.
I think it has to do a lot as well with the way we are measured as a student, already master student, bachelor student, PhD after. It has a lot to do with that. I think it's very valued to be strong, to be the strongest, and we can be strong. That's fine. We can be good in what we do, but what about the collaboration? This is something that is valued more and more, but it's not really measured. It's also difficult to measure. Maybe that's why it's not measured. But yeah.
But shouldn't we try?
I try.
How do you try? Since you're a research manager and you have a lot of people in your group.
Yeah.
How can the research manager empower them to maybe do these? You call them high risk, high gain projects.
I can tell you a bit of my story. For me, it's a bit more about having heads. It's different things. At the end of the day, we have one head. We are at work, we are at the family, where we have different things. So maybe it has to do because I have my children early on. So I was always very used to have different things in my head. So for me, it was a kind of natural thing. So for me, and also I started my PhD not just after my study. There are different ways to do it, but that's the way I wanted to do it. I wanted to gain a bit of experience in other places to get inspired. And then when I started my PhD, I was always very strong in a way that I was very engaged in what I did, but not like strong in a way that I won't be the one and the only. And I think I was very collaborative and very successful. Maybe that's the reason I got my position. I don't know, like my boss. But I think it was appreciated to have this this competence to be collaborative. It's more and more valued.
That's good to hear, and I guess
finally.
But I don't think that that's the case everywhere in academia. There's a lot of pockets where I feel it's very much, as you say, about competition. It's about the papers we push out and the citations we get, and if you're good at that, then you have a chance to be promoted eventually, and everything else, what maybe takes more risks, is not that valued because it's hard to measure it, but maybe also because the system that we have right now is not structured in a way that it would actually help, or that these things would also help. Because if we think about what's our national, the international rankings for the universities, then it's the papers and the citations, and that's what counts. Tura.
Well, I don't think anybody are against collaborations, but
No, sure not.
the problem is that sometimes in very high competitive fields it can also be a risk, right? So I think that you will always have success stories that really manage to make it work. Like, it sounds like you are one of those. But the question is also a bit, what do you do with those that really did the same thing, but it just didn't fly because there is always a risk? And is it fair that maybe they put in a lot of effort and you put your life at risk? Not literally, but you invest a lot as a researcher, as we all know.
And I guess like this is where the universities or like academic institutions could play a role in having your back a bit.
A bit more. It's not that it never happens anywhere, isn't it? But maybe a bit more.
But like in this case where you said what you're saying, that like it's high risk, high gain, but the risk is there, and like if it doesn't fly, like what do you do then?
Okay, one more there, then I'm asking the next question to Anna. Okay, here you go.
So I understand it can be seen as a risk, but to stand alone in the research can be very tough as well. So it's not seen as a risk, but many fail as well. Many PhD maybe even not finish their PhD because maybe they are a bit too alone, maybe. So there is a risk there as well.
Anna, NTNU and Norway has a long history of research and successful oil exploration and gas exploration. And I would like to talk one more time about the research that we do. So not just how we do research with the pipettes and the construction, but what we actually focus on, especially when it comes to eco-friendliness. So you are an ecologist, and when we were talking before, I had the feeling that you are a bit passionate about these topics as well. So how do you see that there's challenges with the way and what we research today, and what can we do to maybe figure out what is valuable research that will maybe help us in academia, but also make this slogan that NTNU has reality? I'm thinking very specifically about research on petrochemicals, on geophysics, all that stuff. What's your point on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like I realized the situation here very, very much like this is the place where future petrochemical engineers are trained, and it is like a university for science and technology. I guess this relates to a bit to what we were discussing already before, that how do we even decide that like what kind of research is being made? And like I'm not like advocating for that like I can decide everything because I don't have the knowledge or the capacity. I don't believe in dictatorships, but I think that there would be for sure more room for open critical discussion on that where does most of the money go, and also where does it come from, and what kind of power structures, what kind of like patterns do we have there, and like having these out on the open. I mean, let's like if there's nothing to hide and everything is great, then there's no problem in being extremely open about this and like having a democratic discussion, like at least like within the university. But then again, if there is something that is like maybe would benefit from a closer look, I mean that would then happen naturally as well.
Tura.
Yeah, no, so I mean, you point a very good point. So I guess some of the answer what do you do is also from top down, like what do we fund and what is valuable. You mentioned value has come up here, which is a great topic we could talk about for a long time. But actually, if I may turn it to a bit practical issue, coming back to this kind of how is it possible to do eco-friendly science, I was thinking, since you happen to mention petroleum as a topic, like a petroleum engineer, I could also think of the example of a health researcher. Like, I know my stuff. It is not kind of within maybe the classical environmental studies that both you represent. What is your chance to build on your knowledge to actually take your own path towards working on sustainable questions. So maybe that's kind of a practical question to consider, because if you really know where you want to go, you can maybe see the competence you have, the expertise you have could be relevant, but maybe you just lack the little expertise that will make you really get the big grants because you are evaluated on your CV. If that was easier, I guess it would be easier to maybe also for these people that you mentioned, for the fields we have, to use their skills towards solving the big questions. Or what do you think? If funding kind of facilitated it.
I'm not sure I completely follow. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
No, so your question is, of course, we need some top-down evaluations for these things to channel the money and the kind of where science should go from some top-down processes. But I was thinking also from the bottom-up processes, like what can an individual researcher do in terms of how you choose your career to look like?
I didn't really understand that, Anna, you were suggesting a top-down process. I felt you were more saying, okay, let's. I don't think you had top-down or bottom-up, but more like a
Sorry,
better...
so I added that. You could think of it both ways.
But that's a good
not
suggestion.
me saying,
Obviously, we can suggest, okay, what kind of study courses do we offer at NTNU? But we can also maybe talk with the NFR, Norwegian Research Council. Okay, what are the projects what are the funds that you make available? And that has so much implications on what research is done, Anna.
But if I understand correctly, you're referring more to like an individual researcher's perspective on that, like how do I...
Because I would think a good solution could be that they have so much competence that they could be really useful for the green shift, for example, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, definitely. However, like maybe I was referring more to a bottom-up approach in that sense that like we are actually discussing with each other, like at the level of the university, not top-down, so that there's like a couple of people at the top of the university deciding, but like we are the university.
I agree. We had that in
I think that's
here,
a very
so I think
important point. Like why
at
is
least
that?
there we fully agree. That's the point. We have freedom actually to ask the questions that are relevant to some level.
And interact, and maybe also have this conversation on a university-wide forum as we have it here right now. Are you done?
For now.
For now. Ladies, we've got 7 minutes left. And we've talked about when is science, the way how we do it is not sustainable, not eco-friendly. And we also talked about, okay, how do we actually make sure that the things that will maybe get us to eco-friendly science and what we do, how we get there. So these two topics. But now I don't like to end this conversation, or I don't like to end any conversation in saying everything is hard and wrong and it's demanding, because I like what you just said, that we have agency. We as researchers, we as people of this university, we have agency, and we can also help in shaping, using our agency to shape these processes. So I would love with you to talk about what we can do. So far we said these are things that are not great, but the question is, what can we do? And I would like to structure this on an organizational level and on an individual level, because it's always easy to put it on, you have to do it yourself, you have to do it yourself, you have to do it yourself. But if there's no backup, then and no support, then that's very challenging. So we have to think about it at the organizational level, yet we can still do something as well. And I would like to maybe just go one round with you, and I'm going to start with Tura. So Tura, what can we do on an organizational level to be better at eco-friendly science, and what can we do at an individual level?
Yeah, good thing. I think we have touched many of it. So evaluation, to think thoroughly through that, and that also has to do with giving individual researchers maybe a bit more freedom than we have today to actually navigate also, or to have the freedom for a little bit of change, not only go for this a bit narrower evaluation schemes that we have. But then individual basis, and I think we kind of ended there in a way that we have a lot of agency. Talk about it. It's an easy, good start that we're doing right now.
Sometimes not easy, but it's a good start.
Yeah, at least. So then if you do that, that's an action actually. We shouldn't just talk, but talking is an action. So I think that's something one can do. And also to use your academic freedom actually, whether you're a student or higher up, ask critical questions and shape the way that you put your curriculum. The thing is, you need to also survive. If you want to be a professor or a research manager or something that can actually have an impact, one needs to take that into account, that you need to kind of survive in academia. And that's where the top-down could help us to survive easier, because then we would have a wider agency. Yeah.
Love it.
Or next,
Anna.
I think like it's in so many issues like related to sustainability and environment, like there is so much pressure on the individual that like you should try to do this and that and like don't fly, don't eat meat, don't do this and don't do that, but do this and these things. I think one critical thing that should happen in all kind of systemic levels is that if we're talking about university now, doing the right thing should be made easy. Because in principle, like, what do you want researchers to do or scientists do in the university? We're supposed to be thinking about our field and like solving problems, coming up with new problems and so forth. But like these kind of practical things like that are related to that how do we like interact with each other and our environment, they should be made like easy for us to do. It should be easy for us to do the right thing in terms of, for example, traveling policies and all such kind of practical matters. Because in so many things at the moment, you have to go countercurrent when you want to do the right thing.
When you want to be eco-friendly and sustainable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I get it. Karine, organizational level, individual level, what can we do?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I start on an individual level first.
Please.
I think more about the eco-friendliness in terms of collaboration, and I think a very easy take would be to just talk more to your colleagues as we do today. The colleagues you know, closer colleagues working on the same topic, but also with your other colleagues in general, as a scientist, being curious and nosy a little bit. And on an organizational level, to create those arena, like it is the case today, for those discussions to happen.
Yeah, I like your points. We are running out of time, Anna, but we have gotten a question from the audience before we started this today. And Tura, we're going to finish with you a little bit because you were traveling this week for 3 days. You went to Germany and came back.
Now I should defend myself. Yeah.
I'll travel to Stockholm tomorrow. I'll take the train, but I'll fly back, so I'm not any better than you. Yeah. So the question is, international research requires our community to meet, to collaborate, and to disseminate knowledge. For example, by participation to conferences abroad. How can early career researchers nowadays reconcile this requirement to travel for research on the one hand, and on the other hand, the concern for reducing the weight of the associated carbon footprint on the other hand? So with this very last question, very practical question, maybe we'll finish this episode. It's not an episode. I'm talking about podcasts here. No, this episode of Science Conversations. But yeah, what would be your answer? Like, what can early career researchers do? Because it is super important for us to meet also internationally.
No, it's a great question and very relevant. And I think also just to raise the question again, it's a critical question. It's already first action done, so good. And also, we discussed it just earlier today. NTNU has actually an ambitious travel policy now to cut it to 50%, because traveling is 30% around of NTNU's CO2 emissions, I think, so it's really considerable. But then we all acknowledge that also collaboration, you put it so much forward, it's the 17th SDG goal, right, to collaborate.
What
so
does
we
SDG
also need
stand for?
Yeah, Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you.
So we need that as well. So if I should defend myself in the last 2 minutes. So we've had a collaboration with a group in Germany for actually 2.5 years. And this was my first visit to their lab. So I think that already is kind of one start point. I think it all comes down to the evaluation of necessity. We learned during the pandemic a lot from Camilla Stoltenberg and Nakstad, in those who are Norwegians, like, is it necessary to travel? And my hope is that if we could just cut the unnecessary stuff, I'm really curious, what will be the number then for the travel? So let's do that first. And then maybe it's more important to start there and not worry too much about the other part. But we could, So necessity, I evaluated this now. It is necessary. We talk several times a week, and to meet people face to face will make it easier to talk later. I went to Berg-Hansen, which is our travel agency, clicked the little eye that you have there. You could even assess the CO2 emissions of your travel, knowing 210, I think, was a kilo of CO2. From, if I can trust these numbers, I would love to hear from you. From if I fly from Trondheim to Leipzig, I took the train to Oslo, plane to Berlin, train to Leipzig, and I more than halved the emissions. Yeah. On the way back, I had to fly all the way, trade-off to family demands and time being spent away. So there is always a trade-off. It's more important to think about it. Yes, exactly, to do something. Yeah. And sometimes it is okay, especially for young researchers. It's even in NTNU's travel guidelines.
Yeah, because it's really important that you actually meet.
It is.
Okay, folks, this was this I can't say episode. What do I say? This edition of Science Conversation. The next Science Conversation will take place on the 20th of April, and it's going to be about shift in science evaluation, quality before quantity. And it's going to be with Nancy Baselchuk, so she's going to be back and hosting this session here. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today. Everyone out there who has been listening to this, thank you for joining us. Thanks for listening. Thanks for maybe learning something, maybe taking this away. With you, please make it available to your colleagues, and hope to have you back. Thank you for joining today. Take care. Goodbye. All the best.